In April 2012, a president died in office. His name was Bingu wa Mutharika of Malawi. To the world, he was just another leader of a struggling nation. But when the investigators moved in, they found something that defied logic. Mutharika has stashed away $3.5 billion. Think about that number. At the time, the entire annual economic output, the GDP of Malawi, was only $5 billion. This man didn't just take a cut of the profit. He effectively stole 70% of his nation's entire economy. While his people stood in mile-long lines for fuel and hospital ran out of basic aspirin, their leader was worth more than almost the rest of the country combined. And the most terrifying part, in the history of African corruption, he is a small fish. Today we are going to talk about the uncomfortable truth that most people are too afraid to say out loud. Why do African leaders keep stealing from their own people? This isn't a video about hating Africa. It's about loving Africa enough to perform an autopsy on a system that's killing it. Point 1. The Colonial Extraction Blueprint. To understand the theft of 2024, you have to understand the design of 1884. When the European powers sat in a room in Berlin and carved out Africa, they weren't creating countries, they were creating extraction zones. Administrative systems they built had one goal: move rubber, gold, and ivory out of Africa and into Europe as fast as possible. There were no checks and balances. There was no accountability to the people. There was only the governor and the treasury. When independence arrived in the 1960s, the liberators didn't dismantle these systems. They simply walked into the vacated offices, sat in the leather chairs, and realized the machine was already perfectly built for plunder. They didn't have to invent corruption. They just had to keep the colonial engine running. The foundation was rotten before the first African president ever took the oath of office. Point 2. The resource curse and the paper trail. There is a paradox in Africa. The richer the land, the poorer the people. We call it the resource curse. In a normal country, the government needs to tax the people to survive. If they tax you, you demand services. But in resource-rich nations, the leader doesn't need your taxes. They just need to sign a contract with a foreign oil or mining company. This creates a disconnect. The leader becomes accountable to the corporation and the bank, not the citizen. And where does the money go? This is where the West's clean hands get dirty. You cannot hide $5 billion in a village in the Congo. You hide it in Geneva. You hide it in a London real estate. You hide it in a Delaware shell companies. Western banks like HSBC, Credit Suisse, and UBS have spent decades acting as the getaway drivers for this theft. They provide the secrecy that makes the grand corruption possible. The theft happens in Africa, but the profits are laundered in the West. Point 3. The Hall of Infamy. Let's look at the names the history books try to soften. 1. Mobutu Sese Seko of DR Congo. He ruled for 32 years. He owned bases in Belgium and the France Riviera. He once chartered a Concorde jet just to take his family shopping in Paris. Total estimated theft, $5 billion. Meanwhile, his people were so poor they had to resort to a barter system because the national currency was worthless. Abacha of Nigeria. He only ruled for 5 years. In that short window, he managed to siphon off an estimated of $4 billion. To this day, nearly 30 years after his death, countries are still finding Abacha loot in an offshore account and returning it to Nigeria in installments. 3. Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe. He took the breadbasket of Africa and broke it. To fund his lifestyle and pay off his cronies, he printed money until the paper it was printed on was worth more than the number on the bill. At one point, inflation hit 79.6 billion%. People became trillionaires who couldn't afford a loaf of bread. Point 4. Poverty as a weapon of control. Here is the part that is hardest to accept. The poverty isn't an accident. If you are a corrupt leader, a healthy, educated, middle-class population is your greatest threat. Why? Because middle-class people have the time to read, to organize, and to vote you out. But a man who hasn't eaten in 2 days doesn't care about democracy. He cares about his next meal. By keeping the population in a state of survival mode, leaders ensure that people are too exhausted to revolt. They underfund schools so people can't think critically, and they control the media so people can't see the truth. Poverty is the ultimate political silencer. The finale. The tide is turning. If this video ended here, It would be a tragedy, but the script is being rewritten. In 2024, the old guard is terrified. In Kenya, we saw the Gen Z protest, young people who couldn't be bribed or intimidated, storming parliament to stop a bill that favored the elites. In Senegal, the people protected their democracy against an incumbent who tried to delay elections. The internet has stripped away the secrecy. In the 80s, a leader could steal in silence. Today, if a minister's son buys a $200,000 watch, it's on Instagram in 10 minutes. The information gap is closing. Africa doesn't have a resource problem. It doesn't have an intelligence problem. It has a leadership accountability problem. And for the first time in a century, the people are no longer waiting for a savior. They are becoming the solution themselves. Who do you think is the biggest accomplice in this story? The corrupt leaders or the Western banks that hold the money? Let's get the debate going in the comments. I drop a deep dive like this every week. If you want the truth about what's really going on in Africa, subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you.